Mr. Sinti, and this is going to be a fascinating conversation about the formation of seeds. Because the formation of the seed is sort of the whole point of sexual reproduction in angiosperms. If you recall from our prior conversations that the male gametophyte, the pollen was forming this pollen tube that was traveling down the style here in through the ovary. Then it's able to enter into each ovule. This is the ovule right here, entering through the micropyle. And inside the pollen tube, there's a generative cell with 2 sperm nuclei. Ready for that? And so one of them fertilizes the egg to produce a diploid zygote, and the other one fertilizes this big cell called the endosperm mother cell, which becomes triploid. Now, the endosperm mother cell is going to provide nutrient for the growing and developing zygote, which will eventually become the embryo. So, do you see here that the outside of the ovule right here? The outside of the ovule will eventually become the seed coat. Yeah, and then inside the seed coat will be the embryo and nutrients, because as it turns out, the seed starts to stockpile like carbohydrates like starch and oils, generally polyunsaturated oils, and it's able to then use those to grow. And then once it reaches a certain point, the embryo will cease growing. It'll become dormant. That's kind of interesting. And then it'll take, for example, it'll be then enclosed in the fruit, but then it'll take water and ultimately to then diffuse into a seed. Like before you plant a seed and germinate it, it has to imbibe water, and then the water will cause the cells to grow. It'll actually get larger, break through the seed coat, and then the root will come out and the shoot will come out. So this is what our conversation is today. It's about seed development and fruit development. Let me start off with a video this time. Take a look at this. This is pretty good.
The embryo is a young plant that grows from the zygote, while the large central cell grows into food-storing endosperm. All this is enclosed within a protective seed coat that grows from the integuments around the ovule.
Those are the
Taking
integuments
food
right
through
there.
its stalk, the developing seed expands its endosperm and embryo. When the embryo is mature and dormant, the integuments develop into a protective seed coat and detach from the ovary wall. The main axis of the embryo has an embryonic root and a short stem that may have a few tiny leaves, not shown here, near the embryonic shoot. The cotyledons are part of the embryo. They're the first leaves. Monocots have 1 cotyledon, dicots have 2. Cotyledons absorb food from the endosperm and transfer it to the embryo. However, plants vary in the time when the endosperm delivers its stored food. In some seeds, the endosperm persists until the seed germinates. Then the endosperm breaks down. The cotyledons absorb the released food and pass it immediately to the rest of the embryo. This happens in most monocots such as corn, wheat, and other cereals.
So what you see here is the embryonic root is the first to appear as the seed germinates.
It also happens in some dicots, such as the castor bean, the source of castor oil. In other seeds, the endosperm breaks down while the seed is still developing. The cotyledons absorb.
So that's important. Let me just back this up a little bit. Like in some plants, you look at these embryonic structures right here, and there's 2 of them. So you're like, hey, dicotyledon. This is right here the embryonic leaves, and these swell up. These become nutrients for the embryo, but then they can actually really puff up when they take a lot of nutrient in. Check that out.
Still developing. The cotyledons absorb and store the released food, becoming very large and thick. When the seed germinates, the cotyledons deliver the stored food to the rest of the embryo. This pattern happens in most dicots and accounts for the very large cotyledons in peanuts, peas, and beans.
All right, so now you have a sense of that. Let me bring you a little taste of reality here. And so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about, turn down the volume of that. So here is a bean that's germinating. Now below the soil you can't see it. The root or the radical is coming out. Here's your very beginning of the shoot system. These are the cotyledons. Do you see these big hunkin structures right here? This is the cotyledons. embryonic leaves swollen right there. Here are the cotyledons. These are the true first foliage leaves. See right there on the bean? And so right here, here's the cotyledons, here's the stem, here are the first branches right here on the very first node, and then this is going to be where primary growth takes place. Right here, this is where it's going to elongate right here and grow from above it. I don't know if you've had a chance to grow beans before and notice these structures right here, the cotyledons. So that's pretty neat. It's a real cool opportunity if you haven't seen this before. But here's the hypocaudal right here. And so let me just pause that for a second, come back over to the notes. And what I want to say about this is we're talking about seed formation now. So after double fertilization, the ovule becomes the seed. And that's inside the ovary. The ovary will then develop into a fruit which encloses the seeds. And as I was saying before, the seed stockpiles proteins, oils, and starch. This is why we like to eat seeds. This is why we like almonds and cashews and all of these sunflower seeds. We like to eat corn because it has a good source of oils and starch. We like it. It's very tasty and nutritious. And so initially, the nutrients are stored in the endosperm, the triploid large cell, but later in the seed development, sometimes that storage is then taken over, as we saw in that video, by the cotyledons themselves. And so this is what we're just seeing in the video. You can't see this below the ground, but this radicle comes out, which is this embryonic root right there. But what we are able to see is this little bend, which is called the hypo caudal. And then here are the cotyledons that come out in the first foliage leaves. Let me come back to the video on that. So here you could see the hypocaudal that's bent right there, allowing it to sort of penetrate through the soil so it emerges. Here are the two cotyledons side by side. Notice how they're kind of swollen. And then below are the first leaves. So all of this cell respiration is being provided, the energy is provided by the starch of the cotyledons. Now, for the first time, the bean's able to produce its own sugars when its first true leaves emerge. So that's kind of neat. I like watching that. It's not often that we're able to see that kind of cool time-lapse photography, so that's kind of a neat thing. So as we move through this, we could start to see that the endosperm is rich in nutrients, which provides nutrition for the growing embryo. And in dicots, as I was mentioning before, the food reserve in the endosperm is sometimes completely exported to the cotyledons. And so that's what happens there. And so the details of this can be troublesome, but we could look at this just for a moment. Like inside here, one of the fertilized cells is the egg, and one of them is the endosperm, triploid and then diploid. So the diploid zygote, you see that down here? That's going to divide through mitosis. It makes this big cell called the basal cell and then terminal cell. It's mainly the terminal cell that's dividing until you reach something. There's terms for everything, suspensor and then proembryo. But basically what we're saying here is this is primary meristem. Do you remember like procambion is going to become the vascular and ground meristem is going to become the ground tissue and protoderm will eventually become the epidermal cell. So here you have like this baby little embryo, and it's a dicotyledon. Do you see that? It's enclosed inside the seed. Now, where did the seed come from? It came from the ovule itself, and right here is the endosperm. Right there. There's the root apex. So this is also meristematic. So basically, what I'm saying is when the seed starts to drink water or imbibe water, that's going to cause more cell division, and then it's going to bust through the seed coat. But the seed coat's really cool because the seed coat can keep the embryo dormant and safe for many, many years until the environment is just right. And depending on the species, the thickness of the seed coat can actually withstand fire. So that's neat. So it'll only germinate after fire, which means the soil is more nutritious. And it also means that there's less maybe competitive plants for the sapling to grow. Maybe there's more light in the area. And then sometimes the seed won't be able to to germinate unless it actually passes through the digestive system of an animal. And so the thick seed coat protects the embryo, and the acid environment of the digestive system wears away at the seed coat. So seed just isn't a baby embryo. It's an amazing structure that angiosperms have developed in order to temporally control their reproduction. And then on top of it all, it's enclosed in a fruit, which then advertises animals to come and eat them and then help to disperse them. So it's really very interesting. So if you were to slice a bean in half, if you've ever done this before, maybe you have, you'll notice that the embryo is inside, and then this is the food storage right in here in the seed coat. This is what it really looks like. Here are the swollen cotyledons, as you can see here, of the bean. Here's the first leaves right there. And then, this is a castor bean. Same sort of thing is happening. You could look at the Hypo Caudal and the cotyledons and seed coat like that. And then to contrast the beans are the great example, the classic example of dicotyledon. What's the classic example of monocotyledon? Perhaps it's the corn. So the corn, which has parallel venation and yada yada like that, but the seed itself has only one cotyledon, and it has this radical right in here. And so let's take a little break from the slide, and let's take a look here at just keeping things fair. Let's look at a seed of corn right here. Do you notice when it's germinating, so water went in, the very first thing that it's forming is its little root called the radical. That goes in. You got to have, look at the little root hairs. You got to have the root come out so you can get water, nutrients, water, water, and then the other cells can divide. Now look at this. This embryonic shoot that's coming up is called the Ophthal. It's an embryonic shoot, and it has like this little sheath surrounding it, the Ophthal. This is going to become very important, and you're like, I don't see the significance. There's some cool experiments done on Ophtals that'll come up in a later discussion. Maybe I'll even come back to it today, and we'll look at that. So let's take a look at this. So this is a picture of what we were just looking at. Here's the corn, and then here's the Ophtal, as I was mentioning. The root, which you cannot see, is also enclosed by a little sheath as well, this little membrane. Instead of it being the Ophtal, this sheet right here, and then here's the first true leaf. This is the Ophtal, and here's the first leaf, is the rhiza. You like that? Ophtal, rhiza. And so the ovary will eventually develop into the fruit, and the point of the fruit is to help seeds to be dispersed, and causes animals to be attracted to it. Now, what's interesting is not all of the fruits are very fleshy. Some of them are kind of dry. So the wall of the ovary becomes something called the pericarp right there. And so this pea is actually a fruit, and inside are the seeds, or the peas. And so when a fruit ripens, it ripens. That's another conversation. By hormones cause it to ripen. Gases called ethylene gas help do that. But the ripening of it makes it sort of edible, if you will, and serves as an enticement. It becomes very colorful, becomes very sweet, and it's so that animals become aroused by that and want to eat it. And ultimately, like the starch breaks down into simple sugars, which makes it more delectable to eat. And so, just wanted to say that the seed, the fact that the big come away message is the evolutionary adaptation of seed germination contributes to the seedling survival. So the fact that the seed is dormant is very good, because you never know when the conditions are right. And so you just don't want to be dropping seeds, and so good luck. So basically the seeds don't germinate unless there's rainfall to get it going. So when people have dried seeds, if you want to start planting them, you have to soak them into water a little bit. And so, and I mentioned this before, but here it is officially, seed dormancy increases the chances of germination will occur when the environment is advantageous to the seedling. That's important to the baby plant when it starts growing. So after rainfall, like for example, if you're a desert plant or something, or after a fire comes, or even after the winter time, or even after some sort of physical abrasion or some sort of acid digestion. Now, the funny thing is, it won't happen until the seed starts to imbibe water. When it imbibes water, the cells start to divide, and then they break through the seed coat, and the radical comes out first, and then here's the cotyledon. I mean the Ophthal. And so, same thing in a bean. You have the epicaudal, the Hypo Caudal, so on top of the caudal, and then this is the stem. These are the first leaves. Here's the cotyledons that are now swollen, and here's the very first root, right, or called the radical. And so, as it rises into the air, the hypocaudal, we sort of looked at this, expands its leaves, and therefore it's able to photosynthesize at that point, so the cotyledons then fall off. And then likewise, we saw this as well. The corn forms the radical, the Ophthal comes up, and then the first full, true leaves emerge. And so, wanted to say this, the seeds are pretty tough, right? They can endure a lot, acid and fire and all of these things in order to make sure that the environment is just right. But it turns out that the seedling, when it actually starts growing, it's kind of vulnerable. And so, predators come along and eat it. After all of that, parasites can kill it, the wind can blow it down. There's a lot of hazards. And so, thus, if the seedlings aren't doing well, that's why I think you're going to need a lot of seeds. The truth is. So a lot of energy goes into making a seed so that you can assure reproductive output. But again, I just wanted to point out something. A lot of work goes into sexual reproduction and seed formation, but it isn't the only way in which a plant can reproduce. You can reproduce vegetative propagation from cuttings, or it can be asexual from sprouts. But the truth is, sexual reproduction encourages what? Variation in offspring. So flowering and fruiting is an expensive way to propagate, but in the end, it's successful. And so I want to conclude with this video here, which talks a little bit about fruit formation. This is pretty cool.
Are mature enough, the ovaries change their function and develop into seed-dispersing structures called fruits. There are many patterns of fruit development, depending on the number of carpels, ovaries, and flowers that form one fruit. Fruits can also be divided into the categories of dry fruits and fleshy fruits. In dry fruits, the ovary dries out at maturity. It may develop hooks that catch animal fur, as in this example, or the ovary and other flower parts may form a wing or parasol or hairs to catch the wind. Sometimes the dry ovary builds tensions that, when released, will shoot the seeds into the air. In fleshy fruits, such as tomatoes and peaches, the outer tissues of the ovary thicken and become soft, sweet, and brightly colored. Fleshy fruits invite animal dispersal. The seeds are ingested, and if they escape digestion, they are excreted with fertilizer, hopefully in a choice location.
Yeah, hopefully. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation about the formation of seeds and the formation of fruits. Thanks for watching.